Rightio. So we're very lucky to have along tonight Dr Sophie-lee Williams from Eagle Reintroduction Wales, who's currently working for the Durrell Foundation, looking at, well, white-tailed eagles in Wales. So she's going to tell us all about that this evening. More people to admit. So basically, I think Sophie's going to do her talk. And if you've got any questions, if you just write them in the chat, I shall pick up the questions from there. And then at the end, I shall put your questions forward. So rightio. If it's all right with you, Sophie-lee, it's entirely over to you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. And I take half of the responsibility for the clash with the football. So it's not all Andy's fault. So you can not take all the responsibility for that. It's mine as well. But I am very honoured to see so many people turn up tonight. I thought that I was going to have a room full of no people. So thank you for joining us. And as Andy said, really tonight we're going to be talking about the white-tailed eagle coming or returning back to our Welsh skies. And I've been working with raptors now for over 12 years, and I've been working with eagles for 8. And I am the founder of Eagle Reintroduction Wales. So I started this journey in 2016. And we've gathered 6 years of scientific evidence on the feasibility of eagles coming back to Wales. So hopefully today we'll give you a bit of insight about how we've got the ball rolling with the potential to return the white-tailed eagle, or Eryr y Mor in the Welsh language. And we're working with Gwent Wildlife Trust now to run these feasibility studies in Monmouthshire. And we're, like Andy said, I am part of Durrell Wildlife team. And this year we are very lucky to have support, and our work has been funded by the Monmouthshire Rural Development Programme. So to get started, tonight's talk will be about how, why, what and when. So how do we go about a reintroduction? Why are we proposing one? What do we need to consider? And where will a reintroduction happen? So, but before we get into the nitty-gritty of the ERW project, it would be rude not to introduce you to our white-tailed eagle, or commonly known as the sea eagle. So the white-tailed eagle is part of the Acridae family, which contains eagles, hawks and buzzards. So they're very much a large bird of prey which is active during the day. And they're part of a group of eagles called Haliaetus, which are fish eagles. So they are very closely related to the American bald eagle, African fish eagle, and Steller sea eagle. So all tied into aquatic landscapes. They are our biggest birds of prey in the UK. They weigh the same weight as a sack of spuds, and their wingspan is over 8 foot. So they're very large on the wing, but they inhabit lowland areas. So they need large wings to carry less area of weight, so that they're this means that they're a slower eagle on the wing, but albeit very efficient hunters. So where will you see white-tailed seagulls? And their habitat, so you'll see these birds mostly around shallow waters of coastlines, estuaries and wetlands, and rivers and lakes. So these birds are littoral zone hunters, meaning that they hunt in the shallow waters, unlike an osprey, which is obviously hunts in deep waters. So they inhabit a different niche here within the Welsh landscape. They nest predominantly in trees or coastal crags, and their prey actually is very general. So mostly they eat fish. 40 to 60% of their European diet. So it's a staple part of their diet, especially in the spring and the spring and summer, when these are readily available. Also water birds like geese, swans, they are staple diets also, or prey items, but also the likes of magpies, corvids, gulls, for example. So they've got a wide selection of prey for birds. These species are all year round scavengers, so carrion is actually a big part of their diet, unlike other eagles or birds of prey, which mostly scavenge on carrion in the winter. These birds are very much like vultures, where they like free food, basically. And also to a secondary capacity, mammals. So rabbits and hares, for example, are very important in a young eagle's diet. So they've got a very general diet, basically. So how do we go about a reintroduction? So now we're getting into the nitty-gritty of the ERW project. So how do we go about restoring white-tailed eagles to Wales? So it's not as easy as what most people make out. You can't just click your fingers and restore these species free willy into the Welsh landscape. These programs are strict, highly regulated license application, and we've already worked 6 years to try to get these license applications prepared. And in the case of Wales, Natural Resources Wales are our authority figure, which give us our permits to release white-tailed eagles into the wild. But like I said, these applications are really comprehensive assessments, which are split into the biological feasibility, environmental feasibility, ecological and socioeconomic feasibility. So can eagles biologically survive in Wales? Is the modern day landscape still suitable? What are the risks and pros of their ecological functions here in Wales? And do they fit into the socioeconomic structure? So a very long list of criteria that or evidence that we have to gather. So over the last 6 years, we have now completed probably about 60 to 70% of these assessments at a national scale across Wales, which we're using that research to guide us on the ground on where to locate really a white-tailed eagle programme. And when we've located a white-tailed eagle programme, then we can launch the rest of our assessments, which are at a regional scale wherever we select that area. And of course, license applications are different for every species, and that's simply because they've got critical dependencies on different species, on the environment. So how do we know basically what evidence to gather? And for species reintroductions, like I said, they're all governed by the IUCN criteria. So both with IUCN and Natural Resources, we're working on gathering evidence in accordance to these global criteria. So why are we proposing a reintroduction? Is a good question. So why is a white-tailed eagle reintroduction the most acceptable option for Wales? And we've gathered a lot of there's a lot of reasoning behind why a reintroduction is an acceptable option, but we'll mention a few today. So we know that white-tailed seagull reintroductions are not a novel concept. So they have been, well, we've got 50 years of experience in the UK where white-tailed eagles become extinct completely by 1918. And in the 1970s, white-tailed eagles were restored to the Isle of Rum. And over the last 50 years, a rolling scheme of reintroductions in Scotland have now helped restore the population to 150 breeding pairs, which are now sustainable and don't need any more human intervention. So this is where our main white-tailed eagle population is in the UK. In 2003, I think, white-tailed eagles were released in South Killarney National Park, where there is now believed to be 12 pairs breeding in Southern Ireland. The east of Scotland followed suit in 2007, which was deemed unsuccessful, which only established 2 pairs of white-tailed eagles. And the most recent reintroduction has happened on the Isle of Wight, excuse me, where that happened in 2019, and so far 29 youngsters have been translocated to help establish a breeding population in southern Britain. So the species is still very much void from southern Britain and Wales. So this is just a few of the pictures from the Isle of Wight release scheme. So eagles in their hack pens, eagles coming out of their pens and being very inquisitive, building social bonds, and obviously feeding on free food, which is what white-tailed eagles do. So in regards to natural colonisation of this bird to Wales, ERW has found that it's going to take at least 50 to 80 years for white-tailed eagles to naturally colonise Wales, simply because the breeding populations are too far north. And these species have strong commitments to their birthplaces. So it's called natal philopatry. So basically, wherever they're born, they automatically breed in close proximity to their birth or their natal area, which means population expansion is really, really slow. So what we found with white-tailed eagles is if we...
Yes. So can I just stop you there? I don't think we're seeing any slides. I think you said there's some photos were going up then and we didn't see them.
Oh, okay. Right. Well, let me share. I haven't shared my screen, Andy. That doesn't help, does it? Do you know, I apologise. I'm not very snazzy with technology.
Not to worry, just when you mentioned then there was photos and then nothing appeared. And somebody did ask me earlier whether there was a presentation. I said, oh, there wasn't yet.
Oh, do you know what? I apologise, guys. Let me share my screen. That would help a lot, wouldn't it? Right. Can you see this now?
There we go. Lovely stuff. Thank you.
So I was thinking then, like, can you see my slides now?
We can do, yes.
Andy, brilliant.
Apologies for not bringing that up earlier, but I thought you were having a bit of a chat.
You swear it's Friday, not Tuesday. I do apologise for that. Well, let's go back to those pictures I was talking about. There we go. So yeah, it would be good for you to actually see the pictures that I'm describing. So actually, let's go back and go through this slide again so that you can understand. So we were talking about obviously the distribution of white-tailed eagles reintroductions across the UK. And I mentioned about the Isle of Wight being the last reintroduction, and obviously breeding white-tailed eagles being completely void in southern Britain. So, and these are the pictures that I was talking about in regards to the Isle of Wight reintroduction, white-tailed eagles in their hack pens, eagles being inquisitive, building social bonds, and obviously learning the landscape as well. And because obviously it's going to take a long time for these species to naturally colonize, we feel like obviously a reintroduction is the most acceptable option by translocating and hacking young birds in Wales. Will create commitments to that area so that these young birds then will come back and breed in Wales. So it's important for the conservation of the species. So we also know that their extinction was human mediated. They were become extinct in Wales by 1830 as a breeding species. Our last historic record was in Kenfig Burrows, or now known as Kenfig National Park on the Swansea coast. And they were completely wiped out of the UK by 1918. And this was solely down to human persecution, which was sadly a trend across Europe for most birds of prey during this time. So we feel like we've got a moral duty to recorrect that human mistake, basically. So we've also know that from our research, there was big knowledge gaps around white-tailed eagles breeding in Wales. So were they historically here before? And there was big knowledge gaps for Wales. ERW has now put a lot of effort into gathering historic records for white-tailed eagles and golden eagles across Wales, and we can confidently say that we've got historic records for every county across Wales. So there's no doubt that these species were widespread like they were across the UK and Europe here in Wales. We've also know from our research that the Welsh landscape has masses of suitable habitat for this species. 51% of our coastlines, our inland rivers, our lakes, are suitable for this bird. So we have a great potential to hold them. So our white-tailed eagle programme here in Wales not only restores the species and has a Welsh importance, but it also contributes to the UK conservation, so has a national importance and also a European importance as well, because the white-tailed eagle is very much our European bald eagle. So we know how white-tailed eagles would benefit Wales, but we know Wales would benefit white-tailed seagulls is what I'm saying, but how would sea eagles benefit Wales? And this, like I said, this is not a novel concept. We've got 50 years of experience of white-tailed eagle reintroductions, and we've seen the benefits, obviously, that it's brought to Scotland, Ireland, now the Isle of Wight as well, and some European countries. So we know, and we've touched upon the conservation contribution. So, for example, we're in the middle of a biodiversity crisis here in Wales. So, by restoring white-tailed seagulls here, we're increasing the long-term survival of the European population. So we know that we can have a contribution to their conservation just by restoring them back to their historic ranges. We know that they're a missing part of Welsh biodiversity. So by restoring white-tailed eagles, we're not only restoring a native lost species, but we're restoring ecosystem functions that have not been in Wales for over 200 years. And what we mean by ecosystem functions is very much the same as the American bald eagle. White-tailed eagles are tied into healthy landscapes and healthy biodiversity. And that comes down to the roles and functions that they bring to the landscape. And one of these functions is predator-prey relationships. So when you remove a predator from the landscape, it alters their prey numbers. So basically, their prey numbers expand, increasing competition in lower orders of the food chain and putting pressures on, for example, vegetation and insect invertebrates. So it has a really negative effect to the food chain. But not only predators, not only prey, but predators as well. So, for example, not only are prey over competing, but mesopredators or middle trophic predators are expanding because they've got no top-down control, which means they're putting additional pressure on the food chains. So basically, by restoring white-tailed eagles, we're balancing that food chain. The main function of an eagle is to keep seasonally abundant prey in check. So a good example of a mesopredator release effect is the influence white-tailed eagles could have on gull populations, for example. Gulls are supposed to be a mesopredator, but at the moment, some species are acting as an apex predator, which means that they're not the food chain is not working as it's supposed to. If we restore white-tailed eagles and we can control some of those gull numbers, it releases pressure and competition at the bottom of the food chain, which basically creates more space and more food for a healthier biodiversity. We also mentioned about scavenging behavior. So white-tailed eagles are all year round scavengers. So they provide they're environmental cleaners, And across Europe, they are natural shoreline scavengers, and they reduce, carcass, nutrient cycling, and also reduce disease as well. So they do bring quite a lot of benefits. Trophic process linkers, what this means is basically they transfer significant amounts of energy through the food chain, meaning that they're providing additional food sources for other scavengers and other prey. So like I said, more energy transfer as well, more healthier species, more healthier prey, more healthier biodiversity, and also resource linkers. So this is a function that hasn't really been in the landscape for quite a long time. The only other species that brings this is the osprey, and we do not really have breeding ospreys in South Wales. So this would, bring masses of benefits to woodland. So white-tailed eagles breed in woodlands. They forage in aquatic landscapes. So they bring in nutrients from, 10 kilometers away, so miles away, that, help kind of recycle nutrients within woodlands. So it's like I said, the only other bird that does it is the osprey. And like I said, they can act as umbrella species as well. So for example, bringing wider benefits to other biodiversity, especially if, for example, in years to come, we do find an important roost site or an important breeding area, we can ask to protect those areas, like I said, which then would protect areas for further biodiversity. So all in all, creating more resilient ecosystems and the animals that live within those ecosystems. So we would be placing Wales as leaders in their progressive stance towards biodiversity conservation and ecosystem restoration. They're also conservation champions. So other projects have found huge benefits by restoring white-tailed eagles. They use these species as, well, they're iconic and charismatic. So they use them as flagship species to create awareness of problems or conservation issues within regions, which is very effective of trying to raise awareness for wetland conservation. And obviously they're also bioindicator species, meaning that we can actually learn a lot from them because they select healthy habitats, and almost like the bald eagle, they're very sensitive to toxins and stuff like this. So we can use them as bioindicators of habitat health and use them for conservation and mitigation as well. So huge benefits. So basically bringing wider conservation benefits to our special places. Economic benefits is one, like I said, that not many people understand with wildlife, but the evidence shows from the Isle of Mull and Skye, white-tailed eagle tourism brings around 4.9 to 8 million pounds of tourist spend every year. It also supports 160 jobs on the Isle of Mull and brings 2.1 million pounds to the local income or regional businesses. So, what a white-tailed eagle programme can do in Wales is provide an opportunity to regenerate and diversify regional, coastal or rural economies or communities. So a huge amount of benefits. So what do we need to consider? So what resources are here for white-tailed eagles? So we've already said there's loads of suitable habitats, but what else have we looked into? So we know that, like I said, 51% of Wales, is suitable for white-tailed eagles. And we know that the average territory size for white-tailed seagulls is around 70 kilometers. They can range very small if there's a lot of prey availability, or very large if there's, for example, not a lot of prey availability. But we feel like they would very much be on average like they are across the UK. So if that's the case, Wales has the capacity to support 50 to 151 pairs of white-tailed eagles. as a whole. So like I said, adding to that huge conservation contribution. And at the moment, because we're working in Gwent Wildlife Trust, we are running these feasibilities for feasibility assessments for South East Wales, and looking at Monmouthshire as a potential to restore these species, and looking at the wider landscape. Southwest Britain can support 7 to 51 pairs. So with a release scheme, for example, in Southeast Wales, what we would be aiming to do is to restore, in 10 years' time, 6 pairs of white-tailed seagulls. And those 6 pairs of white-tailed seagulls would probably establish a territory within this buffer. So for example, what our feasibility assessments are suggesting, that if white-tailed eagles are restored in Southeast Wales, establishing 6 breeding pairs over 10 years here will allow not only facilitate the reintroduction of the species to Wales and be able to disperse quite nicely across the south and west coast, but also would help the Isle of Wight project with trying to strengthen those breeding populations in southern Britain as well. So we've also had a look at nest sites. So like I said, at a national scale, we've had a look at coastal nest sites and also coastal mature trees. And there's safe to say there's plenty of them around for these birds to disperse. There's, like I said, an abundance of inland mature trees as well around lakes and river systems that these birds can choose. So there's plenty of nesting resources across the Welsh landscape. And we've also had a look now at this at a regional level across Monmouthshire and the Severn Estuary. And as you can see, the coastal capacity, so in purple, these are coastal crags. There is plenty of opportunity for these birds to disperse over time, like they are in Scotland, for example. So we feel like Southeast Wales would be a perfect fit for the conservation of this species. We've also had a look at large mature trees, and as most of you know, in Monmouthshire, we've got a great cover of ancient woodland, and most of our tree cover is, like I said, inland here alongside the Forest of Dean. So we know that the species would anchor in there first, and then, like I said, have the opportunity to breed in coastal crags, or like I said, coastal or inland trees. So plenty of resources. We've also had a look at breeding displacement. So it's not all about looking at how much habitat it is. So habitat suitability is very different to habitat availability, and that's simply because of perils from people like persecution and modern day land features or land uses. So what we've looked at is how much historic breeding habitat has been lost. So we've had a look at this through the displacement of wind farms at a national level and also modern urban areas as well. And all in all, we found that across Wales, 2.5% of white-tailed eagle habitat has been lost to wind farms, and 2.8% of historic habitat has been lost to urban areas. So we've still got quite a lot of available habitat for white-tailed eagles is the conclusion, almost 10,000 kilometres of available habitat, even when we look at the modern land uses. So this is what it could potentially look like or for example, the historic habitat that's lost across Monmouthshire. And like I said, because it's at a much regional scale, it looks like it's a lot of red, but we do still have over 2,500 kilometres of habitat just within the Severn Estuary alone. So the potential for this, for these species across the whole of West Wales is just fantastic. So we've also looked into prey availability, but we are looking, like I said, we're running feasibility studies at a regional level as well as a national level. So we haven't completed these assessments yet, but I will share with you what we do have. So we do know that there's over 1,000 prey items for white-tailed eagles, so they don't make my life easy. And we know that on average per day, white-tailed eagles need about 500 to 600 grams of food. So realistically speaking, for such a large species, they don't need a lot of feeding. So we know that because there's so many prey items, they're extreme prey generalists. They obviously like free foods, like carrion, and they don't require a lot of food for a size. So our question really is there enough prey availability for white-tailed eagles? And, you know, we're looking at prey really that's within their carrying capacity of 1 to 5 kilograms. 5 kilograms is kind of more, you know, very rare occurrence, but it can happen. The average kind of prey that they take is normally 1.5 kilograms on average. So I'm really not expecting you to understand this table. I just wanted to show you how much work has been put into prey availability across Wales. So basically what this table is showing is the abundance or relative abundance of prey across Wales at a regional scale in accordance to each of these biogeographic regions. So if we focus on Southeast Wales, for example, and applying our feasibility studies to a regional level, we can see that we have a really good combination of prey availability in Monmouthshire and the Severn Estuary. So for example, we know that there's an abundance of ducks, geese and swans, which is staple diet for white-tailed eagles. Cormorants and shags are in good abundance as well. This is per 10 kilometres, by the way. So this is the number of ducks, geese and swans per 10 kilometres. This is what this table represents. We know that we've got herons. There's good amount of herons around. Gulls, huge numbers. Huge numbers of crows, raven and magpies. And grebes as well are in relatively good numbers. So a really good composition of birds, species available. And also mammals. Obviously we couldn't do this at a fish level because obviously it's just presence and absence, but we are working with local fisher groups to try to get more data on fish species. But hares and rabbits are in good densities in lowland areas of Wales, especially in Monmouthshire. We know that there's, you know, fox would probably be taken obviously as carrion rather than obviously hunting. Rats, mice and voles, you'll be quite surprised how much rats white-tailed eagles do hunt. So they are in high abundance as well. And also, like I said, so there's plenty of birds and mammals around. We are looking to obviously dig a little bit deeper at species level now that we're working within Southeast Wales. So this, like I said, we're hoping that we can share more specific data with you next time. But this comes down to where will a reintroduction happen. So all of our work obviously with Gwent Wildlife Trust has been to run these feasibilities for Southeast Wales in particular. So our main question is, you know, can we restore white-tailed eagles in Southeast Wales? What are the benefits? You know, how do the IUCN criteria fit? And, you know, we can confirm that it fits really, really well. And there is a lot of support in the general region. And this year, you know, we have launched release site selection. We've not confirmed a release site yet, but we have worked with we've worked with over, we've visited over 60 sites at the moment across Monmouthshire. and we've worked with multiple landowners to basically survey if there are any release sites that we can use for our project. So, you know, we're still very much looking at the data and looking at the best approach here. And like I said, we haven't yet confirmed a release site, but it is looking really promising that our white-tailed eagle programme will be situated in Monmouthshire, which is a very exciting opportunity for South Wales, considering I'm from South Wales and I never thought it was feasible here. So, you know, this is what our release site selection looks like. You know, red are our viable sites. You know, we've still got some sites to look at, and obviously our non-viable sites are in yellow, private, etc. So yeah, it's looking very promising. So I suppose what happens if South East Wales is viable? Well, you know, we will launch the next steps of the project, and that's very much our regional efforts, looking at, like I said, prey availability at much more depth, running social studies. You know, how do you feel about white-tailed eagles coming back? And so, yeah, so that's what our next steps will be, and it is looking very likely that it is viable. But if South East Wales is not viable, then obviously we will be repeating our release site selection. So either looking at more release sites and working with more landowners, or just looking at the outskirts of Monmouthshire. But like I said, I'm very excited to see this project develop, and it's developed really, really well over the last year working with Gwent Wildlife Trust. So yeah, it's a very exciting opportunity for South Wales. And yeah, that's me wrapped up really. So diolch yn fawr am wrando. Thank you very much for listening. And we'll pass over to questions now. So yeah, I'm very happy to take any questions you have.
Thank you very much, Sophie-lee. That was great. And needless to say, there's loads of questions. So brace yourself.
Brilliant. I'm glad, Andy, because considering I missed half of my presentation, I don't think I deserve questions, but there you go.
Oh, there we go. That was all the words you were saying were great. Just
yes, just no visuals.
So we've got a question here from Norman. Is it salt or freshwater fish that they eat?
That's a good question. So both. So what they eat both really. So for example, northern pike is a common prey item. I'm trying to think of other species. Shallow water species, basically any shallow water fish they will take. So grey mullet is a huge saltwater fish, for example, that they eat, and northern pike, so in freshwater systems as well. So yeah, both, but as long as they are species that use shallow waters, because white-tailed eagles can't plunge dive like an osprey, they can only pluck out of the water.
There we go, thank you. I think you touched on this in your talk, but will they spread naturally from Scotland?
Yes, but it will take around 50 to 80 years to do that. So yeah, we'll be waiting a long time.
Now, Jeremy, is the paper that Sophie-lee is describing available for public access?
Is that the historic paper? I think so. Yes, the historic paper for the history of white-tailed eagles is public access. You don't have to pay for it. You can just put the history of eagles into Wales and it would come up. It is, I can't remember what journal it is, but it's an open access journal, so it can be accessed online. So yes, I can send. Can I send the link? I don't know. I can't promise.
You can probably write it in. You can probably paste it into the chat, I would imagine.
Okay, we can do that. Let me Google it quickly, and then I can put it in, and then everybody has it. History of eagles.
I won't bombard your mind with any more questions while you're doing that.
Oh, thank you. 2 seconds. There we go. Oh, I say that. There we go, on evidence-based assessment. Technology. Okay, so if I put this link in, you just download full PDF and it should download straight onto your computer. I've lost the chat. Oh, right. Okay, technology. There we go. So it's on ResearchGate. So that's the historic paper that we've got published. And we're hoping to publish some of, most of our other research as well. I think it's accessible via ORCA if you're in academia. But I am working to make that public access, so bear with me on that one.
Thank you. Another question, will they control mink and grey squirrels?
Good question. I'm glad the mink question came up. So we've got evidence in, I think, Germany, and they've had effects in Norway, that they have a correlation between controlling American mink, which is an invasive species, and it's also invasive species in the UK. So yes to mink. I'm not quite sure about grey squirrels. I'm not sure. They're not really a forest, they're not really adept like a goshawk or a buzzard to fly within forests or woodlands because they've got a big wingspan. So they probably would be able to take a grey squirrel if they were running on the ground. But like I said, mink, yes, grey squirrel, yes, but not a staple diet at all.
Right, yeah. You said that Wales has a capacity to support up to 151 pairs of seagulls. Is that the maximum capacity for both eagle species, or could golden and white-tailed eagles share territories? Brilliant talk.
Oh, thank you. That's a brilliant question, actually. So we know that, for example, from studies up in Scotland, and obviously white-tailed eagles and golden eagles, share a lot of habitats across Europe. They have no direct competition. They hold very different niches in terms of breeding, prey. There's some overlap with prey, but not high competition at all. So it is, when I first founded Eagle Reintroduction Wales, it was my objective to restore both species. At the moment, the work that I'm doing with Durrell and Gwent is predominantly white-tailed eagles. The Welsh landscape is able to support 151 white-tailed eagles. That's just white-tailed eagles. Golden eagles, we feel, like I said, would be a much smaller population. We feel like Wales could hold about 40 pairs. So hopefully in time we'll get there with golden eagles, but we don't feel like the landscape's right at the moment. We're still working with Welsh Government to try to increase awareness of our upland habitats.
Okay, thank you. Got a question here from a lady who heard you give a talk during the pandemic. Now they're wondering how the decision to prioritise Gwent came about when the Gower and some North Wales areas scored higher. And then they said exciting stuff, and would welcome examining further seagulls on the Glamorgan coast, and we would need to do groundwork to warm people up and prepare them for natural spread from Gwent.
Yes, so you are very right. So if you follow DRW, the research showed that, for example, in optimal habitat, North Wales and West Wales is more optimum in regards to suitability for white-tailed eagles than Southeast Wales. But like I said, there's a lot of, so with the IUCN criteria, we know that there's a lot of Wales that can support white-tailed eagles, and in order to restore them, like I said, we not only need to make sure it's optimum and suitable habitat, but we need to make sure there's prey available there. And also, like I said, the attitudes are right in that region. So, and the fact that we didn't have a partnership when we were working and running those feasibility studies for my PhD, so the partnership with Gwent Wildlife Trust has really opened up my eyes to the potential of this species in South Wales. So I hope that answers your question. Yeah.
Thank you. Very quick question. Do they eat wood pigeons?
Yes, they do. So one of the staple diets on the Isle of Wight, and something that we've learnt very much, so all of our birds are satellite tagged on release. And like I said, the 29 young birds that were released on the Isle of Wight were satellite tracked. And like I said, we can follow their movements, and we do diet analysis as well to know what species they're eating. And yeah, wood pigeon is a very slow species on the wing. And like I said, they're a really easy catch for a white-tailed eagle. So yes, they would. And like I said, they're really abundant across Wales. South Wales, we're littered with wood pigeons. So like I said, and Canada geese as well. Canada geese, they would definitely take Canada geese. So I see the white-tailed eagles solving some of our issues with some of these overabundant prey species.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to combine two questions. It says, I understand white-tailed eagle reintroduction in Norfolk was vetoed by landowners, farmers over public support. Would the same problem arise in Wales? And someone has asked what the local farmers think about this. So. Good
question. So let me just write these down before I forget. So public support. So yes, it's unfortunate that it's been in the media recently that the Ken Hill project as of last year fell through. I just like to clear that up. That was, like I said, that's still happening. So that reintroduction that the Roy Dennis Wildlife Foundation is still running. Basically, they've got a license to restore white-tailed eagles in East Suffolk, and they are now looking for a release site. And I think, like I said, that's happening. I've got hiccups. So like I said, sometimes, you know, when these are not initiated by the conservation body, and you've got landowners sometimes which want to be involved, and then like for some reason social opposition kind of gets the better of them. So we believe this is why our release site selection is very important in Southeast Wales. And like I said, we've got a lot of private landowners or environmental kind of non-government organisations which are in support of this. There's a lot of conservation initiatives that would like to see the white-tailed eagle back. So we hope that, like I said, in regards to landowner support, we would get it. So it wouldn't influence our licence. And in regards to local farmers and public support, we've done our first tier of engagement. And like I said, when we've selected our release site, then we will then go and start our public consultation, which is then speaking to community members, you know, public opinion surveys, speaking to farmers. But over the last 6 years, you know, we haven't avoided these unions. You know, we had a meeting with NFU. We've had, you know, they're aware of Eagle Reintroduction Wales. You know, we're working with all the right people when, you know, we can't avoid the obvious, basically. We need farmers on board, we need the shooting industry on board, and we need the fishing industry on board as well. So these are our key interest groups that we hope to speak to now as of next year.
Thank you. Right. The next one is the $1 million question. When?
When? Oh, it's a good question. So if we can confirm a release site in Southeast Wales, which our deadline's approaching quite quickly, Andy, isn't it, this year? It's gone. It's just, this year's just whizzed by. So if we can confirm a release site in Southeast Wales, we would hope that we would go for a 2025 release. So for example, we would submit a license to NRW and we would hope for a 2025 release. But they, like I said, these are very long processes. So yeah, so if everything runs smoothly, it would be amazing to see these birds back in 2025.
Thank you. Really enjoyed the talk. Thank you. And this is basically, it's quite a long question, but it's how's the project communicating with other organisations protecting other sort of protected species that may be prey species? They've mentioned curlew, for example, which there's lots of work going on in Wales and presumably
yes.
prey species.
Yeah, so this is what our kind of work has been really over the last year, is not only release site selection, but speaking to conservation initiatives on the ground to see if there are any, or if there is any opposition around species. So for example, this area is very sensitive to the protection of wintering waterfowl and waders. So we're now working on habitats regulations assessments to assess the risk and benefits to some of these species. But, you know, speaking to experts across Europe with white-tailed eagles, and also, you know, the Wildfowl and Wetland Trust, for example, you know, the ecosystem functions that these species would bring would actually create a more healthier realm of species. And, you know, it's actually shocked me speaking to the likes of RSPB, you know, Newport Wetlands, for example, you know, which we felt that were going to oppose the project. But they turned around and said they would welcome them because they know what's happening out on the wetlands at the moment, you know, with bird species which are overabundant and not the landscape not working as it should. So actually conservation initiatives are really supportive of trying to bring sustainable management back, other than the butt of a gun, for example.
I think there's another sort of very similar question, but they finished theirs with saying an excellent talk, and they're so excited to see where the project goes. That's all good. And the next question is lambs discuss.
Yes. I'd be disappointed if this didn't come up. Yes, so lambs. So with white-tailed eagles across the European range, there is no wildlife conflict with livestock, particularly lambs. The only conflict that arises at the moment, it doesn't happen in Ireland, it doesn't happen in England, it doesn't happen in Norway, it doesn't happen in any European country other than Scotland at the moment. Politically speaking, there is a compensation scheme for white-tailed eagles. So we feel like so that could be the reason why it's so much of an issue in Scotland compared to these other European countries. However, the evidence suggests that white-tailed eagles, you know, lamb is incorporated in the white-tailed eagle diet. You know, evidence of lambs being in nests, you know, offer irrefutable evidence of that. However, the main question around white-tailed eagles and lambs is whether they take healthy, viable lambs, which would be impactful, or do they take already dead, sick, weak and injured? And what the evidence shows is very much like any predator instinct. These species can take up to 5 kilograms. So for example, if I know quite a few sheep farmers myself, so if you've got, and it depends on the species, of course, but most UK species, especially Welsh species of sheep, you know, at birth, they are, you know, lambs are birthed at 5 kilograms. So that's actually reaching the carrying capacity of a white-tailed eagle. So what happens, you know, is basically if the lamb is underweight, for example, or injured, weak, sick, or diseased, then that's when these birds of prey are taking the opportunity. And it's the same with, for example, geese and water birds. So it's kind of within their instinct to do that. Do we feel like white-tailed eagles would have a significant impact on livestock in regards to finances? No, we don't. But like I said, that's something that we're very kind of open-minded to listen to farmers and, you know, present the science and present awareness around the real behaviour of these species. And just to add to that narrative, really, this is why we satellite tag the birds. So for example, you know, on the Isle of Wight, you know, they when they first released the birds, you know, they had one particular landowner which within a couple of days kind of inboxed the team and said, look, I've lost so many lambs, and and obviously when you check the satellite tag data and realize that it's only 4 days after the release and all of the birds in the release site, and they've never even ventured to that part of the island. Like I said, when you turn up and obviously show the evidence and then obviously it's a very different story. But if, for example, that we didn't have the satellite trackers and that went out to the media, it has a very damaging effect to the perception towards these birds, but also the projects within themselves. So we would know where our birds are at all times, and we would work with landowners very closely here in Wales.
Okay, thank you. There was a question about satellite tags. You've answered the question before I even answered.
Oh, there we go. I'm psychic apparently now as well.
Would GWT reserves be considered for release sites, or would the release sites be on private land?
Yes. Well, I think Andy can vouch for me here. But like I said, I have visited all GWT sites, and there are a few which can be used, and there's a few, like I said, that have ranked top in our release site selection. But like I said, with public access land, sometimes could be just a high disturbance to the birds. So this is part of the criteria, and what we're thinking about is private land out of the public, well, without public access would be much better for the birds. But like I said, there are a few GWT sites in our final selection, so we'll see when we confirm. Really, we'll have a look at the rankings and go from there. But yeah.
Right, thank you. Now you put the link to that paper up. I think the chap was after a different paper.
Oh, is he? Okay.
Just in the paper which formed the background to several of your slides published by Durrell/ERW. I don't know if you know which one that would be.
Let's have a look. Let me see if I can go back. Are they the habitat suitability ones? Let's have a look. Yeah, I think maybe I can't find it, but so we've got, like I said, the historic paper is within, like I said, anybody can access that we've paid for that to be public access. Oh, this is it. Okay, this is good. I've got the chat up. So Jeremy,
that's it.
Right. Okay. So this is I can make this available for anybody who wants it. I just need help on how to make it available. So this is a document that I put together, and it's just basically a written report. It's not published, it's not within the public domain, but I use it for, like I said, to create awareness around ecological functions. The idea come from Welsh Government, basically, but I can circulate a draft of this around. I just don't know how to do that. Oh, Hamish, you can help me.
Oh, there we go. Hamish is for this kind of thing.
Yes. How would you suggest to circulate this report, Hamish?
There we go. If Hamish beavers away. And
sorry, I'll unmute myself and talk if you can hear me.
Yes.
Hello. So I haven't got the laptop properly. Anyway, yeah, if it's like a document, like a Word document or something like that, we can save it as a PDF, and I can probably email it out to attendees or something fancy like that. Possibly, it depends what it's on, but we can talk about it afterwards. It might not be instant, but I'm sure we can get that out to people.
Fantastic. Jeremy, I will get that report to you. So yeah, I can send it to Hamish as a PDF. I've already got, I've got a PDF version. I'll do that now after the talk, and it'll be circulated around for anybody who wants it. So yeah, so thank you, Hamish, for that, because like I said, I'm not technology snazzy at all. Put me in the middle of the hills, I'm happy, but behind a computer, I'm not. But yeah, so is there any more questions?
There's just a few. Have you still got the energy for these?
Yes, fire away.
Would you use animals translocated from Scotland or from the European continent, maybe Poland perhaps? Would it be useful to use continental birds for genetic health, as the original Scottish bird came from a few Scandinavian founders?
Right. I just realized that, like I said, source population wasn't mentioned in this talk, and some of my talks I've got in, some I haven't, but that is a fantastic question. So as part of the IUCN criteria, source population and genetic considerations are one of them. And we took into consideration sourcing Scottish birds because the Isle of Wight project was sourcing Scottish birds. The Scottish population is now deemed as sustainable. So, for example, what we need to provide evidence of is if we take, for example, 50 birds over a 5-year period from the Scottish population, will that have a long-term negative effect on that population over time? And with our assessment, what we found was that because the Isle of Wight had sourced, or is aiming to source 50 birds from that population, another reintroduction would tip that population over the edge. So we found that the Scottish population wasn't viable, even though the cheapest option isn't viable. So we've gone back to the Norwegian team, which is the original source population, which has been sourcing the Irish, the Scottish, and normally that would be deemed unviable because, like I said, we've got our birds from Norway. Well, all of our UK populations would be from Norway. But what we found, and we've got, like I said, genetic studies now in Cardiff University as well for whitetails and UK, European white-tailed eagles, is we found that they are very genetically diverse as a population, and we've only got one genetic type across Europe. So that allows us to tick those genetic questions of saying, well, there's no genetic bottleneck. So because the genes are so varied in this population, and there's over, oh gosh, I think there's over 3,000 breeding pairs in Norway. So, and obviously they're well managed by the NINA facility, which is a research facility out there. So we know that, number one, it's viable, so we're not going to affect the population. And we know that, like I said, we won't have it wouldn't influence the genetics here in the long term either.
Lovely. Thank you very much. And then I think there's 3 questions left. I'm going to combine 2 of them.
Okay.
Relate to electricity. So proliferation of major electricity transmission routes on the Gwent levels. And the other one particularly relates to all the solar farms which are sort of in the pipeline for the Gwent levels, and whether these are going to have an impact on the potential programme.
Good question. So the solar panels, that has actually been brought up quite a lot in regards to this new proposal. And what we're hoping to do really is, like I said, there's not much literature out there on the influence of foraging behaviour and these mass solar panels going out in shallow waters. But we are, like I said, reaching out to experts and using examples of science of the wildlife interactions on terrestrial surfaces as well, because obviously this isn't a new thing. Solar panels are influencing our in terrestrial inland areas. And we're working, like I said, with the Severn Estuary Partnership as well to obviously try to have a look at these impacts in a more thorough way. With the electricity transmitters, these birds have got an 8-foot wingspan, so very much like any other species that are using the Gwent landscape at the moment, with a larger wingspan than 4.5 foot, or 5 feet, which I think is the width, would have a very similar risk of a collision, basically. But what we know is that adult birds, like I said, the collision risk is very, very small because they're experienced flyers and know the landscape. And like I said, with young birds, like I said, they would have to learn like other species about that. So, and we're hoping, like I said, to work with you know, kind of electricity organizations, I suppose, like National Power, for example, partnered up with the East Scotland White-tailed Eagle project. So like I said, there's plenty of opportunities for us to do the same in Wales. This is a long-term commitment. So like I said, these stakeholders are important in this conservation project.
And then there's, I think, one question here about lambs. A lady who works with farmers impacted by lamb losses in Scotland.
Mm-hmm.
Impact is often less about financial loss and more about having fewer lambs to choose replacement ewe lambs from for hefted hill systems, meaning they keep poor quality lambs for breeding, which in time leads to reduction in the quality of the flock. And they said they're happy to have a chat about this.
Oh yes, anything to do with white-tailed eagles and especially lambs as well. Yeah, I would be very I'd be very interested in speaking about your experiences actually. Yeah, are you, if I put, like I said, if you've got access to my email, can she email me or he?
You can put your email in the chat if you're happy to do that. You might get bombarded by everybody.
Oh, it's fine. That's what my job is. My job is to answer questions. Yeah, I'll put my, I don't even know my email. Oh, do you know what? Give me a pen and paper.
Yes, I know.
Did you say you had another question, Andy, when I tried to find
yes, yeah, while you do that, there's two hopefully quick ones here. Really enjoyed the talk. Just wondered, with eagles being top predator, are there any issues with water pollution, sewage and plastic pollution choosing release sites?
Yes, so basically, you know, it would be a consideration for anywhere that we place this in Wales. You know, the criteria would be very similar, you know, wherever we based it. And we are looking at the minute at water quality and how it's affecting other species within the Usk and the River Wye and the river systems that are flowing into the Severn Estuary. So basically what we're doing is still gathering data on that. But because the Severn Estuary is deemed as such a wildlife haven in many ways, you know, like I said, there are current mitigation measures for pollutants of other species. So like I said, we're in discussion at the moment with how we manage that, and you know, if it would be an influence. But these species, like I said, are inhabit very similar landscapes right across Europe. So it's just, like I said, sharing that expert knowledge of how they, or trying to predict on how they would act within this very urban landscape. But for example, if you look at examples in, so for example, in Helsinki, they breed very close to a big city, on the outskirts of a wetland. So there's, you know, there's a big city in I can't even say it, Helsinki, and like I said, it's fringed by a wetland, and they breed right in the middle of that wetland. So like I said, they're hardy species, but they are vulnerable to like poisons. So for example, secondary poisoning or non-targeted poisoning, mostly tied into the shooting industry, unfortunately, which, like I said, many current birds of prey are experiencing in England and Scotland at quite an intense level. It does happen in Wales, but not in big numbers. Whether that's under-recorded, we can't say, but the data shows that, you know, persecution is not rife in Wales. And this is why, like I said, I love my job, because our Welsh raptors are doing extremely well. Our hen harriers, our ospreys, our buzzards, our red kites. So that just shows within itself the attitudes towards birds of prey in the Welsh landscape. So yeah.
You mentioned about grey ties in superbly to the very last question.
Okay.
Related, but is there a reason why conservationists wouldn't want to reintroduce osprey in South Wales first to strengthen the gradually growing population in North Wales?
It's a good question. And do you know, if I could get my hands on osprey reintroductions, like I said, I would, because I've always thought this, you know, I've always thought that we could expand our osprey populations. You know, West Scotland, then Pembrokeshire, I mean, is amazing for ospreys as well. But yeah, I don't know. So like I said, we've got the capacity to do it. Like I said, I just need more people. But like I said, at the moment, you know, I think our osprey populations are doing well up in North Wales. There's now 6 breeding pairs, where I think, gosh, 10 years ago we only had 1. So like I said, they are doing really well, and it's being bolstered actually by the Rutland Water Project. That's a reintroduction program in England, and we're finding a lot of mix between Welsh and English birds, which is bolstering that population. So yeah, and we do hope that you know, they would settle in southeast Wales, but ospreys are very much like white-tailed eagles. You know, they breed really, you know, they're very slow and have got natal philopatry as well. So like I said, it could happen, it definitely could happen, but unfortunately I haven't got the time and resources at the moment.
Get the eagles done first.
Yes, white-tailed eagles first, and then maybe ospreys, and then golden eagles.
There we go. Thank you. Right, I'm going to finish with one last bit out the chat, which is simply Stephen says, superb talk, far better than the football. Thanks.
Thank you. I appreciate that, because like I said, I was so worried nobody would turn up. So yeah, thank you very much for joining us this evening. I really appreciate it. I'm going to put my email in the chat. So like I said, if you've got any questions, or if you want to share your experiences, like I said, just give me a shout. Yeah, like I said, I really appreciate your time. So thank you very much.
There we go. No, thank you. There's lots of people saying good luck and fantastic talk and all such things. But a big thank you to Sophie-lee, who it's great to have someone doing a talk who really knows their subject, and it's an exciting subject, and I think good things are going to happen. So I'd say watch this space, and we may have you back in a year or two's time, and you'll be some footage of a Welsh eagle. So there we go.
Yes, that's the plan, Andy. That's the plan. Actually have eagles to talk about other than like theoretical ones. Yeah.
There we go. Thank you very much. But before everybody goes, I have to say this. It's apparently today is Giving Tuesday. So it's a national thing, but we're launching our big Christmas Give Appeal today. So for the next week, if you donate, or I think also if you join Gwent Wildlife Trust, you can give gifts of a membership of Gwent Wildlife Trust for Christmas, which is coming up. If you give a donation in the next week, it gets doubled. So there we go. I've done my little bit of sales work at the end there. So thank you very much for everybody turning up tonight. And big thank you to Sophie-lee. And there we go. Everyone off to watch the football. Thank you very much.
No. Thank you, everyone. See you soon. Thanks,
thanks
Andy.
a lot. Bye now.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye now.